Good morning, class. So, we are here this morning. We are going to discuss our subject in the Introduction to Philippine Criminal Justice System. So, today's topic, we are going to focus more on part 1 of our discussion, the historical development of law and its related concepts. So, meaning to say, we are going to focus more with the historical development of the law of the Philippines and of course its related concepts in order for us to understand really the criminal justice system in the Philippine setting. So let's moving on. Now, as part of our discussion, we have the scope of the discussion. First, the concepts about criminal justice system. And the second one is the justice system of the Philippines, and the last one is hierarchy of laws. First, let's tackle about the concept about criminal justice system. So what really is criminal justice system? Okay. So what is criminal justice system? Accordingly, it is the machinery which the society uses in the prevention and control of crimes. So meaning to say it is a machinery in which composed of different agencies in order to prevent and even control the possible occurrence of crimes. And it may also refer to the totality of the activities of the law enforcers. Of course, that involves the function of the police officers. And the second is the prosecutors, the one to conduct in-depth investigation to determine the probable cause, if really the crime exists or the person is the one really who committed a crime. And the third is judges or the judge. Of course, it will or he she determines that the person is the one really uh, the one who committed the crime. And the corrections personnel, when the time that the accused or the criminal uh, had been judged or convicted by final judgment, as well as those of the mobilized community in crime prevention and control. So, mobilized community, it talks about those agencies, establishments, and or people of a particular community that would somehow uh, going to help in the crime prevention and control. So now let's move on. Example of which criminal justice system. The criminal justice system of the Philippines is composed of the following components. So we have the following components. First is the law enforcement, the second prosecution, and the third is court, and the fourth is corrections. And the fifth one is mobilized community and many others. So let's discuss them one by one. So the system how the components work is this. If a person committed a crime or violated any law, a complaint will be filed against the person at the nearest police station which has jurisdiction over the area. So meaning to say, whenever the crime has been discovered and therefore the person is being identified, it must be filed or the complaint will be filed against the person accused or the person suspect at the nearest police station. Nearest police station, it talks about a police station who has the jurisdiction over the area. So meaning to say, it is the police station who have or who are going to exercise their power or their function or their jurisdiction over the area na wherein the crime has been committed. So, hindi pwede yung police station na magsasagawa ng investigasyon na hindi naman niya saklaw yung area na kung saan nangyayari yung crime na ginawa ng isang suspect. Okay. So, an investigation will then be conducted by the police. Gather facts and evidence about the case. So, as what I have said a while ago, that whenever the crime has been discovered and reported thereto in the nearest police station, and therefore the person suspect has been identified, and the police now will gather facts and evidence about the case. Could be through physical evidences, or it could be the accounts of the victims or the accounts of the witnesses pertaining to the case that has been discovered. And if there is probable cause, the case will then be forwarded to the prosecution. How would police investigator or police officer determines probable cause? Of course, to determine the probable cause, they are going to conform the 5 W's and 1 H. So whenever the crime is identified or discovered, and the suspect is identified, its whereabouts, and the possible evidences of the said crime, and it will be then now forwarded to the prosecution. So what then is the function of the prosecution or the prosecutor? So the prosecutor will determine whether the person arrested or suspected be in the seat of the criminal justice process. Anong ibig sabihin ng be in the seat of the criminal justice process? So let's focus on the criminal justice process. Meaning to say, before the prosecutor will continue to dig deeper, to conduct in-depth investigation, they should determine first if the nature of the arrest of the suspect is in accordance with what is required by the law, or in terms of gathering of evidences and or facts in the part or on in the level of police during the uh, discovery of the crime, is they are exercising their power and functions in accordance with the law. Because otherwise, whenever the police officers conducted investigation or even extracting a information maliciously coming from the suspect, it might be now the pitfalls or siya yung maging dahilan na hindi ma-file yung information or yung kaso doon sa korte. So that would be the first step to be done by the prosecutor. So the prosecutor determines whether the evidence gathered by the police meets the standard of proof for successful prosecution and conviction. So meaning to say, yes, there are evidences that had been gathered by the police investigator and had been uh, presented thereof to the prosecutor for the prosecutor to determine if those evidences gathered by the police investigators or police in charge with the case had met the standard of proof for successful prosecution. Standard of proof, meaning to say, it is in accordance with the law. In terms of how the police investigator gathered the evidences, how they preserve them properly, how they extract it, was it in accordance with the procedure that had been set by the law? Saklaw ba ito sa kanilang jurisdiction? Okay? So those are the things that should be determined by the prosecutor. Yung gagawin talaga ng prosecutor is dapat nilang inaalam kung meron bang probable cause. Tama ba yung proseso? Tama ba yung sistema na pagkukuha ng mga ebidensya ng mga police investigators? Okay. So, of course, in the level of the prosecutor, they will conduct preliminary investigation. So, ito yung mga bagay na ito na pinagsasabi ko kanina under sa preliminary investigation. inaalam kung meron bang probable cause, kung yung mga ebidensyang isinusubmit or pinapakita ng mga police investigator doon sa prosecutor had met or meets the standard of proof for successful prosecution. Of course, that will be done within 15 days, okay, by the prosecutor. Now, let's move on to the next one. Once determined, information will be filed by the prosecutor to the court. Once determined, anong anong tinutukoy dito sa once determined? Ibig sabihin, once determined by the prosecutor that there is a probable cause and those evidences presented by the police investigator had met the standards therefore that set or has been set by the said rules, and that is the time that the information will be filed by the prosecutor to the court. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, the information or the case will not be filed by the prosecutor before the court whenever there are lot of loopholes, maraming mga anomalya, okay? Hindi kaaya-aya yung pagsasagawa ng investigasyon na maaaring magpataob sa kasong ipafile nila doon sa korte na may saklaw over the subject matter. So, sa level pa lang ng prosecutor ay inaalam na nila kung paano sinasagawa ng police investigator yung pag-iimbestiga base sa mga procedure at saka sistema sa kanilang mga protocols. So, in court, let's move on. In court, trial will then be held to determine the guilt or innocence of the accused beyond reasonable doubt. So, meaning to say, once the information filed before the court, it is now the duty and responsibility of the court to try the case. So, the trial will then be held to determine the guilt or innocence. So, magsasagawa ng hearing or trial yung korte para alamin kung guilty ba or inosente yung suspect. Okay? Accused na ang tawag ng suspect kapag nandoon na sa level ng korte or na iangat na yung kaso doon sa korte. Okay? So, innocence or the guilt of the accused beyond reasonable doubt. So, meaning to say, guilt beyond reasonable doubt, guilty sa krimeng inaakusa laban sa isang suspect or accused na walang pag-alinlangan. Okay, let's move on. If found guilty, so meaning to say, sinong magdedetermine na guilty yung tao? It would be the court na mayroong saklaw or has a jurisdiction over the person accused. Okay? So the person will be transported to the prison institution to serve the sentence of imprisonment. So meaning to say, once found guilty na yung accused, the accused now will be transported or will be turned over to the prison institution para magsiserve ng kanyang sentensya ng imprisonment. Okay. So, ibig sabihin, sino yung magdidetermine kung ilang taong isi-serve yung sentence of imprisonment ng isang accused or criminal? Of course, it would be the court to determine the term of service of sentence of imprisonment of a particular accused or criminal. So if found not guilty, ibig sabihin, hindi siya guilty or wala siyang kasalanan sa isang bagay or kaso na sinasampa laban sa kanya. So it means that the person is acquitted with the crime charge against him or her and has no criminal liability. Ibig sabihin lang nun, acquitted. Mapawalang sala yung accused or yung suspect. At that is the time na pwede na siyang ibalik doon sa community. So, walang criminal liability base sa investigasyong isinasagawa. Sino ang determine na walang criminal liability? Again, it would be the court. Sino yung mag-a-acquit ng kaso kapag nalamang hindi guilty yung accused? Ito yung korte ang magdedetermine na acquitted yung isang suspect and or isang accused. Now, let's move on. Who is criminal then? Okay, sino ba tong mga kriminal na to? Sino tong kriminal? Okay, aalamin natin yan. So, criminal, it refers to any person who is charged with a crime and was found guilty. Meaning to say, matatawag lamang yung isang tao na kriminal kapag na-charge siya ng isang kaso or crime na kanyang nagawa at saka napagtanto ng korte that he was found guilty beyond reasonable doubt. Found guilty. Okay, siya yung nakagawa ng kasalanan na walang pag-alinlangan. Okay? Beyond reasonable doubt and convicted by a competent court in violation of law. Meaning to say, saka lang natin matatawag yung tao na kriminal kapag the person was found guilty of the case charged against him. Saang level ito? Of course, in the court pillar or in the court level. So, sino yung magko-convict? Sino yung mag-determine? Of course, convicted by a competent court. Sir, ano tong competent court? Pag sinabi nating competent court, ito yung korte na may saklaw patungkol sa isang taong nakagawa ng kasalanan na kung saan ay sina-charge ng prosecutor ng isang crime na kung saan sinasagawa ng isang police investigador. Okay? So, convicted by a competent court in violation of law. Meaning to say, competent court, it is a court who has jurisdiction over the person accused and of course over the subject matter pertaining to the crime that had been committed by the person accused. Okay? So, matatawag lamang na kriminal. Kasi, suspect yung tawag sa isang tao when it is still in the level of police investigation. So, and of course, respondent kapag andon na sa prosecution level. At saka ang tawag naman ay criminal in the level of court, accused rather, in the level of court. Kapag found guilty at saka convicted na ng competent court yung tao, meaning to say nakagawa talaga ng kasalanan, ang tawag doon ay criminal at saka naipasok na sa penal institution or correctional institution. Criminal ang tawag sa kanya. Okay, let's move on. Example, Adi is known by her friends as a gal who wears signature bags and clothing. Adi works as a drug dealer where she earns a lot of money out of it. Her illegal business had already been reported to the police. Okay. So the police then set up an entrapment operation and she was arrested. Proper charges were filed against Adi and she was tried in the court of law and was found guilty beyond reasonable doubt. So as you can see in this particular example, there was this person named Adi who happened to be indulged or engaged in illegal businesses wherein she earns a lot of money and of course determined by the police or discovered by the police of such crime committed by her, and she was actually arrested through entrapment operation. And of course the proper charges were filed against Adi from the time that the police investigator filed a complaint in the prosecution, and the prosecution was the one who filed an information to the court. And of course, on the level of hearing or trying the case is in the level of court, and Adi was actually found guilty beyond reasonable doubt, and that was the time that Adi was sent to jail or prison. Okay, so whenever Adi already served the term of his service of sentence, that is the time that Adi will be released to the community. Okay, so let's move on. What then is justice? What is justice? Okay, so it is the principle of dealing with fairness and equality in the application of law. The idea of giving a person his due as a matter of right. So meaning to say, pag sinabing justice, ito yung isang isa sa mga rights na itinalaga ng gobyerno na kung saan nakasaad sa 1987 Philippine Constitution, okay? Na wherein each and every person has the right to due process of law. Meaning to say, if the person is being suspected or accused of a particular crime that had occurred, the person accused or the person suspect therefore must be exercise or must enjoy uh, the right to presumption of innocence. So meaning to say, the person will not be considered as criminal or the one who committed crime unless otherwise tried therefore by the court and convicted by final judgment beyond reasonable doubt that the person accused or suspect is the one who committed crime. Okay, so that is what we mean by justice. So ibig sabihin, kapag dinakip yung isang suspect na sinuspitsahan na sa yung gumawa ng isang kasalanan or pumatay ng tao, kahit na nakita ng pulis na pumatay ng tao, still the person should be given a right in terms of exercising his right to have a due process of law. Okay. So kinakailangang uh, i-determine ng korte kung siya ba talaga ang gumawa ng kasalanan, okay, sa pamamagitan ng pagpapakita o pagpapipresent ng mga ebidensyang kinakailangan na nagtuturo o nagpapatunay na siya talaga ang gumawa ng isang kasalanan o isang krimen. Example, a person was set free from prison after fingerprint examination shows that another person's fingerprint was present at the crime scene. Thus, he is innocent of the charges against him. Ibig sabihin, ito yung justice na pinag-uusapan natin dito eh. Okay? Na kung saan, na dito sa example natin, okay? Na kung saan may isang tao, okay, na napag-alaman na siya yung gumawa ng isang krimen dahil nakitaan siya ng fingerprint na kung saan nangyari ang isang krimen. Okay? Pero, ano ang nangyari dito? Through the fingerprint examination, okay, pinapakita dito na may ibang tao ang gumawa ng krimen na yon, okay, nandahil sa mirong, okay, because there is another fingerprint of a person that was present or being recovered from the crime scene where the crime was committed. So, ibig sabihin, itong tao to ay napawalang sala. Kasi, bakit? Pinapakita dito na yung fingerprint na nakita doon sa crime scene ay hindi sa kanya, kundi ito ay pagmamay-ari ng ibang tao. So, hindi naman pwede yung justice na pinapakita dito ay yung taong napag-alaman na walang kasalanan ng dahil lang sa fingerprint ay nire-release, okay, was set free from the prison. At yung tao na napag-alaman na kung saan ay nakitaan ng fingerprint from the crime scene ay siya talaga yung taong gumawa ng kasalanan at dapat na makulong yun. Okay. So, there was this saying that it's better to free a thousand criminal than to imprison an innocent one. So, ibig sabihin, mas maganda pa yung maraming mapapa or ma-release na mga kriminal galing sa priso kaysa naman merong isang taong maipakukulong mo na wala naman talagang kasalanan. Diba? So, yun yung justice eh. Meron tayong dalawang principle or prinsipyo ng justice. Yung una is justice as process. Okay. Yung pangalawa naman is justice as substance. Pag sinabi nating justice as process, it must conform to the definition of due process of law. Okay? Now wherein each and every individual should should enjoy the same rights as what others is enjoying. Okay? So meaning to say, justice as process, yung person suspect or person accused should be given an opportunity that his or her crime should be investigated further in order really to determine or even to rebut that he is not the person who committed the crime or even he is the person who committed the crime. Okay? So, and of course, should have the right to be heard before the court. Okay, that is what I mean by justice as process. Pag sinabing justice as substance, let's put it in a simple way. When we say justice as substance, ito yung kung ano yung kaparusahan na dapat ipataw sa isang pobre, okay? Sa isang walang kakayanan or kakayahan sa buhay ng isang tao ay siya ring dapat na parusa ng isang mayamang tao na kung saan ay nakagawa ng kasalanan na kapareho ng yung taong walang kakayanan sa pamumuhay. Okay? So, that is, no one is above the law. Na kung saan, no rich, no poor. Okay? So, meaning to say, whatever the punishment that will be given to those poor who committed a crime of murder should also be the type of punishment that will be given to those rich people who also committed crime of murder. So that is what we mean by substance. So meaning to say, kung ano yung batas, kung ano ang nakasaad sa batas, na kung anong kaparusahan na makukuha or maibigay sa isang taong nakasala base sa batas ng ating bansa, ay siya ring kaparusahan na maibibigay sa bawat taong na naka-violate nito o nakakommit ng crime against that particular law, whether be a poor person or a rich one. Okay? Because I believe or we believe that our justice system is believing that no one is above the law. Okay, let's move on. System. So, pag sinabi natin system, of course, it talks about the process, the procedure or the step-by-step procedure or process, or a coordinated body of method or organized way of work. So, that is what we mean by system. So, why are we talking about criminal justice system? Quote-unquote system. Kasi, this particular criminal justice follows procedure, follows a particular system na wherein the government set a standard or a criteria or a procedure na wherein each and every personnel, whether be a personnel in the law enforcement or personnel in the prosecution, personnel in the court, personnel in the uh, corrections should follow accordingly or should exercise their power and functions in accordance to the offices that they are in. So that is what we mean by system. What then is due process? So ito yung pinag-uusapan natin kanina. Ano tong due process? Okay. So due process is a concept of law which hears before it condemns. So meaning to say, kinakailangang marinig muna ng korte, malaman ng korte kung ano ba talaga yung mga nangyayari. Sino ba talaga ang may sala? Tsaka ang korte na magdidesisyon kung guilty ba talaga yung accused o hindi guilty. So, that is what we mean by which hears before it condemns. Kinakailangang alamin, kinakailangang dinggin kung ano yung mga kasalanang ibinabato sa isang suspect, saka ito hatulan ng guilty o di kaya'y hindi guilty. Okay? So, which proceeds upon inquiry and renders judgment after trial. So, proceeds upon inquiry. Ibig sabihin, kinakailangang pag-alaman yung mga ebidensya na isinusumite ng prosecution or adverse party doon sa korte. Kinakailangang nire-review at saka kinakailangang ini-evaluate ng korte kung ano ba talaga ang totoo at ano yung hindi totoo. Tsaka ito magbibitaw ng kanyang salita or will give its final judgment, okay, after trial. Okay. So, let's move on. Example. John Pite was suspected to be the person who robbed Pedro's apartment. John Pite cannot be imprisoned if there will be no evidence to prove that John Pite did not rob the apartment. He must undergo a court trial to determine if he is guilty or not guilty of the charge against him. This is what I am talking about a while ago. So, ibig sabihin, due process. Okay. Okay, nalaman ni Pedro na ito si John Pite ang siyang nagnakaw sa kanyang apartment. O ano ba yung ninanakaw ni John Pite sa apartment ni Pedro? Okay. Pero hindi talaga mailagay sa prisuhan si John Pite kapag walang ebidensya na nagpapatunay na itong si John Pite ay siya yung nagnanakaw o niluluuban niya yung apartment ni Pedro. So, para talaga malaman at saka mapagtanto kung ano talaga ang mga nangyayari at, at talagang mapag-alaman kung ito ba talagang si John Pite is the one who committed robbery crime. Okay. So, what must be done? He must undergo a court trial. Mag-undergo ito sa court trial para pag-alamin ng korte na talaga bang guilty or hindi guilty yung si John Pite. Kapag guilty si John Pite, of course, yun yung tinatawag natin na due process kasi merong mga ebidensyang nagpapatunay at saka nagtuturo na itong si John Pite ay talagang niluluuban niya yung apartment ni Pedro. At saka on the other hand, not guilty kapag yung mga ebidensyang sinusumite ng prosecution o yung mga ebidensyang pinapakita during the court trial or during the court hearing ay hindi katanggap-tanggap or kulang ang ebidensya o talagang hindi malakas na na siyang magpapatunay na si John Pite yung taong nang loob sa apartment ni Pedro ay talagang hindi siya makukulong kapag not guilty yung adjudication ng isang korte. Okay? So, yun yung tinatawag natin na due process. must be heard before to be condemned. Okay? So, hears before it condemns. Tinutukoy dito ay yung korte. Okay. So, let's move on. So, we are now on the second scope, the justice system of the Philippines. So, the Constitution of the Philippines provides that the Republic of the Philippines is a democratic and republican state. So, meaning to say, pinamumunuan ito ng malayang pamumuno, okay, na kung saan ang mga tao ay malayang magdidesisyon kung sino yung taong magiging liderato ng bansa at kung sino yung mga taong magre-representa para sa mga tao ng kani-kanilang mga probinsya at saka mga distrito. Okay. A representative government whose public officials derive their mandate from the people, acts on their behalf, and are at all times accountable to them on the principle that their office is a public trust. So, ito yung justice system ng Pilipinas. What are the three branches of the government? Of course, meron tayong branches or mga sanga ng gobyerno. Okay. Ito yung mga, there are three equal branches of the government. First, we have legislative. The second is judicial, and the third is executive. These three operate under the doctrine of separation of powers and a system of checks and balances. Ibig sabihin, yung power of the executive cannot actually overpower the power and function of judicial as well as the power and function of legislative. Ibig sabihin, meron silang separation of powers. Iba yung power ni executive, iba yung power ni judicial, at iba yung power ni legislative. At saka meron silang sistemang tinatawag nating checks and balances. Ibig sabihin, kung ano yung magiging desisyon ni executive, kinakailangang mapag-alaman muna at saka under the approval or even under the concurrence of the judicial and or legislative. Kung ano naman yung magiging desisyon ni judicial, andoon naman si executive at saka si legislative ang siyang, okay? Ang siyang tumitingin dito kung talaga bang naaayon sa desisyon ni judicial, naaayon sa mga bagay na kinakailangan pagdesisyonan ni judicial. At ganun rin naman si legislative kung ano yung dapat na gawin ni judicial at saka executive. Okay. First, let's tackle the function of executive under the executive branch. Okay. In the executive branch is headed by the president, who functions as both the head of state and the head of the government. So, meaning to say, executive branch, ito yung pinakamataas, okay, na office or opisina na sangay ng gobyerno. Okay? Na kung saan pinamumunuan ito ng president or presidente, vice-presidente at gabinete. Okay, ito yung mga namumuno under sa executive branch. Okay. So what then is the function of executive branch? It is charged with the faithful execution of laws. Okay? This entails the prerogative to choose who to prosecute for criminal violations. Okay, as well as the apprehension and punishment of law breakers. Ibig sabihin, ito yung nagsasatupad ng mga batas. Ito yung nagdedetermine o nang aalam kung sino ba talaga yung nakakommit ng crime. So, isa lang ito sa mga function ng executive branch. The executive branch is also has the power to grant reprieves. Okay? So, ito yung tinatawag natin na mga executive functions and or powers, commutations of sentence, and pardons, and to merit fines and forfeiture after a final judgment of conviction has been issued by a court. Okay? Like for example, in uh, pardons, di ba? So in pardons, of course, it would be the executive personnel under the executive branch to really determine if the person will be qualified for the pardons. And if qualified for the pardons, and of course, there are conditions to be followed by a certain uh, accused individual. So this will only be given uh, whenever the final judgment of conviction has been rendered or issued by a court. So let's move on. Legislative branch. Okay. So alam naman natin yung function ng legislative branch. Ito yung branch or sangay ng gobyerno o sanga ng gobyerno na kung saan sila yung gumagawa, sila yung nagpapatupad, sila yung gumagawa, sila yung nagpo-propose, sila yung nag-aamyenda, sila yung nagre-repeal ng mga batas ng bansa. Okay. So in the Philippines, the power to propose, enact, amend, and repeal laws is vested primarily in Congress. Okay. So the Congress consists of the Senate and House of Representatives. Okay. So, na kung saan yung Senate at saka House of Representatives ay meron ding kaukulang katawagan dito. Okay, na kung saan yung Senate ay tinatawag nating higher house. Okay? At saka yun namang House of Representative ay tinatawag nating lower house. Okay. So who are or how many members under the Senate House? There are 24 members in the Senate House, while there are 304 members of the House of Representatives. Ano ba talaga ang struktura ng legislative branch? Okay. Ang struktura ng legislative branch, of course, most especially in the perspective of the House of Representatives, ang struktura nito, meron itong pwesto na 304 seats. Okay? 304 seats for 300 representatives na kung saan meron itong 243 or 243 from congressional districts representatives. At saka meron namang 61 or 61 party list representatives. Okay. That is for the seats or pwesto. At saka political groups under which is political blocks. So meron silang kanya-kanyang pinipresenta sa loob ng Kongreso. At saka as to the committees, merong 63 standing committees at saka meron namang 17 special committees. So that is the structure of the House of Representatives under the legislative branch. Okay, so to continue with, the Constitution also provides certain mechanisms by which people can directly propose and enact laws or approve or reject any act or law passed by Congress or local legislative bodies. So, meaning to say, itong Constitution, ano bang Constitution na tinutukoy natin dito? Of course, walang iba, yung 1987 Constitution. Ito yung Constitution na nagre-reviso o nagre-revise sa 1973 Philippine Constitution. Itong 1987 Constitution, ito yung kapanahunan ni Cory Aquino. Na kung saan, okay, nagbibigay ng mekanismo or mechanism sa mga tao na kung saan they can directly propose and enact laws or approve or reject any acts or law passed by Congress or local legislative bodies. Okay. So, merong criteria, merong mechanism, kung pasado ba to, kung ipapatuloy ba tong batas na to. kung i-approve ba to, okay, kung i-reject ba to, na kung saan saklaw ito under sa local legislative bodies or saklaw sa Kongreso. And of course, laws generally take effect 15 days from publication in a newspaper of general circulation. So, ibig sabihin, kapag na-publish na itong batas, okay, kapag na-publish na itong batas through general publication via newspaper of general circulation, the said law that had been publicated will take effect within 15 days from its publication. Okay. So this is the function of the legislative branch, which has the power to propose, enact, amend, and repeal laws, which is vested primarily in Congress. Okay, let's move on. Third is the judiciary. Okay. The judiciary, it is the branch of government that is engaged in dispute resolution. Okay. Okay, ito yung sanga o sangay ng gobyerno na kung saan sila yung magre-resolba ng mga uh, kaukulang mga issues and or disputes. Okay? So the judiciary is the only agency that has the power to interpret the law when it is unclear or susceptible to the different interpretation. Meaning to say, ito lang yung sangay ng gobyerno na kung saan mayroong kapangyarihan na nagsasaad na sila yung mag-i-interpretar or mag-i-interpret kung anong ibig sabihin ng batas na hindi kaaya-aya or batas na hindi klaro, okay? Or mga batas na kung saan ay talagang prone or susceptible sa iba't ibang interpretasyon na kung saan nagbibigay ng mali-maling interpretation, okay? Na magulong pag-i-interpretar ng isang batas. Okay. So the judiciary also must protect rights and resolve disputes in accordance with its definitive interpretation of the law. Definitive, definite. Okay? Klarong pag-i-interpretar ng isang batas. So sino-sinong bumubuo dito sa judiciary branch? Okay. So, meron tayong Supreme Court. Ito yung pinakamataas na korte ng Pilipinas. Okay. Supreme Court. Meron yung pangalawang mataas ay Regional Trial Court. Okay. So, Regional Trial Court, dito hearing or dinidinig yung mga kasong na kung saan saklaw nito yung mga crime o krimen na mayroong o nag-uumpisa sa 6 na taon pataas. Okay? So, at saka next naman, under which bumubuo is Municipal Trial Court, Municipal Circuit Trial Court. So, ito yung mga korte. At saka meron tayong special courts under sa judiciary. So, ano tong mga special courts na to? Under which meron tayong family court, meron tayong juvenile court, meron din tayong court of tax appeals. Ilan lamang ito sa mga korte na kung saan saklaw sa na kung saan ang special courts ay may saklaw dito. So ito yung mga korteng bumubuo under sa judiciary branch. Next, we have the hierarchy of laws. So, ito yung batas na kung saan tumutukoy sa pinakamataas at saka pangalawang mataas na mga batas. Okay, hierarchy of laws, order of laws. So, wherein, dito natin na makikita na sa ibabang bahagi ng pyramid na ito ay statutes at saka treaties. So malalaman natin ngayon, mamaya, the difference between the statutes and the treaties. And of course, we have the highest form of law, which is the Constitution. Okay. The 1987 Philippine Constitutions na kung saan, okay, considered to be the mother of all laws. Okay, the foundation of all laws. Bakit kaya ito tinatawag na foundation of all laws? Okay, tinatawag na mother of all laws. Okay. Let us discuss that later on. Let's move on. Okay. Constitution occupies the highest level in the hierarchy of laws of the Philippines, which is considered to be the mother of all laws. Kasi tinatawag itong mother of all laws, walang batas na isasagawa at saka walang batas na ipapasa at walang batas na ipapatupad kapag hindi naaayon, okay, if it does not conform to what is being set or stated under the Philippine Constitution. Ibig sabihin, kapag yung mga legislatures under the legislative branch will make, amend, or even propose laws, must always conform to what is being set or stated under the Constitution. Kasi kapag merong batas na ipasa, which is a law that encroaches the provisions of the 1987 Philippine Constitution, that will be considered as null and void or will become unconstitutional law. Okay? So pag sinabing unconstitutional law, ito yung batas na ginagawa o ginawa o naipasa na hindi naaayon sa mga batas na sinasaad under the Constitution. Okay, so that is the perspective of the Constitution. Let's move on. Okay. Statutes. Ano naman tong statutes? Okay. So, statutes enacted by the legislative branch which have the next highest precedence. Okay. Na kung saan pangalawa, okay, na batas sa Constitution. So, these are statutes enacted by the legislative authority of the Philippines, specifically the Congress. So, through executive legislative powers, example of this is we have the PD 705, the Forestry Reform Code of the Philippines. So whatever the violations committed by a particular person or even juridical person, any of the provisions of which is subject for scrutiny or subject for scrutiny by the said law. So that is considered to be statute. Another is we have Republic Act. Okay? Republic Act 3815 or 3815 or also known as Revised Penal Code of the Philippines. Okay? Na kung saan nakasaad doon yung iba't ibang crimes against person, crimes against person, crimes against, of course, chastity, crimes against public order, and many more. Okay, so those are examples. And of course, we have Republic Act 4136. That is a law pertaining to the rules and regulations that had been set for the sole purpose to be enacted by the LTO. Okay. So let's move on. We have Acts and Republic Acts under which statute enacted by the legislature from 1899 to 1935. Okay. Commonwealth Act, statutes enacted from 1935 to 1941. It is during the American occupation. Republic Acts. These are the statutes enacted from 1946 to 1972 and from 1987 until now. Okay, this is actually during uh, that time before President Marcos to the time up until latter part of Marcos. Batas pambansa or national law, statutes passed by the legislature from 1978 to 1984 during periods when the executive exercised legislative powers. Okay, so it was the time also of uh, Marcos. Presidential issuance have also been considered statutes. Some examples are presidential decrees issued by President Ferdinand Marcos from 1972 until 1986, as well as executive orders issued by President Corazon Aquino from 1986 to July 1987. So local government ordinances as well, which are passed by local legislative bodies, are also considered laws that apply within the jurisdiction of the local government unit that passed them, provided that they are consistent with national laws. Treaties. Ano naman tong treaties? Okay, let's discuss this one. Treaties is entered into by the executive branch with the Senate's concurrence, have the same status as statute passed by Congress. So, ibig sabihin, these are the laws wherein uh, created or entered into by the executive, but of course with the concurrence of the Senate, okay, which have the same status as a statute passed by Congress. So it is become part of the Philippine law once ratified by the Senate. Okay, so it is stated under the Section 21 of the 1987 Constitution provides that treaties and international laws are valid and take effect when concurred by two-thirds of the Senate. So, meaning to say, if concurred or agreed upon by the two-thirds population votes of the Senate, it will uh, be put into law. So, of course, we actually uh, banded with different international laws or treaties with different uh, affiliation internationally or international laws. Of course, we are also the signatory of the United Nations, signatory of the uh, different international affairs or international affiliations and or organizations, like for example anti-trafficking of human person or international anti-trafficking of human person, and other international organizations na wherein the Philippines is a signatory, and it is now part of the Philippine laws that na merong saklaw, okay, na merong saklaw na kung saan nagsasaad most especially in international crimes that could be committed uh, within the Philippines. So it is being part of the treaties, and of course na kung saan ang batas na ito ay sumasaklaw sa mga liderato or mga leaders ng ibang bansa, or na kung saan meron tayong this immunity na kasunduan or batas from the other countries na sinasatupad sa ating bansa. Okay? So, of course, that is with the concurrence of the Senate. Now, let's talk about law. Okay, so law is a Norse word, of course. It is legally defined as a rule of conduct, just and made obligatory by legitimate authority for the general welfare and benefit of all people. So, meaning to say, made a rule of conduct. Meaning to say, ito yung nagsasaad ito kung ano ang dapat na kaukulang uh, ano yung dapat na kaukulang uh, kaukulang kilos na gagawin ng isang tao na nakabatay sa norms in the society, and of course just and made obligatory by legitimate authority, meaning to say it refers to those who are in position, those who have legitimate authority in the society or in the government, para sa, okay, for the general welfare and benefit of all people, para sa kaayusan, para sa uh, rights, and para sa, of course, kaginhawaan ng bawat tao or taong Pilipino. So this is in connection with the famous legal Latin maxim which states that salus populi is suprema lex, or the safety of the people is the supreme law. So meaning to say, uh, the safety of the people is yun yung pinakamataas na batas. Okay. Yun yung pinakamataas na kinakailangang ina-uphold ng isang gobyerno. So law serves as a variety of functions. For instance, first we have the criminal law. So criminal law defines crimes, threats of their nature, and provides for their punishment. Under the criminal law, we have this Act number 3815, or also known as Revised Penal Code of the Philippines, wherein it is the primary source of the criminal law in the Philippines. Na this particular law actually protects those individual who are vulnerable from those aggressors, okay? And of course, it also prohibits individual to do such crime against person, and it also mandate and oblige citizen of the Philippines uh, to report, or even to be the machinery of abating crimes in their respective area or in the Philippines as its nation. So this particular law has been created in order to oblige individual, in order to protect individual from the aggressors. So the Code Committee of the Act 3815, not Republic Act, Act 3815. The Code Committee are, of course, the following person. We have the chairman, Anacleto Diaz. So this is the face of the chairman, Anacleto Diaz, and we have the following members: Quintin Paredes, Alex Reyes, Mariano De Hoya, and of course Guillermo Guevara. Let's proceed. Okay. We have also here the commercial law. This encompasses conducts in the field of business, trading, and merchandising. Of course, in order really to have fair trading, or fair competition in the business world or in the market world, of course, commercial law has been created in order not to oppress those micro business by the macro business, so that there would be fair opportunity, fair competition between the macro business or macro enterprises and micro enterprises or micro businesses. Next, we have the special laws. So these are usually promulgated to cover cases or areas of governance which are not usually stated in the existing laws. So meaning to say, special laws, ito yung mga batas na sumasaklaw, okay, sa to cover cases or areas of governance which are not usually stated in the existing laws. Okay. So, meaning to say, like for example, in the revised penal code, there are there are things stated there. There are crimes that had been stated in the revised penal code, which uh, which could only be uh, catered with the RA 3815, but there are a lot of acts and criminal acts that could not be found in the RA 3815 Act not Republic Act 3815, which needs to be covered under the special laws. Okay. Yung special laws dito, it refers to Republic Acts, okay, Republic Acts, Batas Pambansa. Of course, we have also the executive orders. So, yun yung mga special laws. Okay, like for example, Republic Act 5487, it is a law pertaining to private security agency law. Now, wherein those who are violating the terms and conditions or even the provisions of the RA 5487 will be dealt accordingly with that particular special law. So, according to Max Weber, a German sociologist, the primary purpose of law is to regulate the flow of human interaction. So, meaning to say, itinalaga o sinagawa yung batas para lamang na ma-regulate yung daloy ng mga yung daloy ng human interaction o yung daloy ng mga kaukulang uh, kilos ng mga tao, because sometimes when person is over exercising its rights, that person somehow stepping on or encroaching the rights of others, diba? So that is why na yes, you have the rights, but your rights has limitation, diba? Which somehow prohibits you to even encroach or step on the rights of others. Okay? And your action must always conform to what is normal or the norms in the society. Diba? So that is what we mean for the purpose of the creation of the law. So those are the things for today. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to the channel Cream Nose. Class, I want you to subscribe the channel Cream Nose in order for you to be kept updated for the next educational videos for this class. Hopefully that you will be able to even learn little bit of our discussion this morning. So thank you, have a great day, and God bless you all.